Do you know what Nectar of the Gods is? Let me give you a hint. It's been credited with bringing men and women together for centuries. Beer, beer, beer. In my book, beer is not superfluous. At the conclusion of my speech today, you should have enough information in order to make beer at your own home if you wish. I've been making beer for about 3 years now, and I have made over 100 gallons of beer in my house. And I have gotten many people started on this endeavor. And I know it's going to be a good day at my house when the doorbell rings in the afternoon and I'm sitting in my study working, and I go out and there's a box from somebody I helped get started with a case of beer that they want me to taste. I've heard many origins about how beer was created. And one that I'm partial to is as follows. One day, a man leaves his woman behind in the village to collect grains. Well, he goes off hunting. This is somewhere circa BC. Well, he goes off hunting, the woman goes out, collects the grains, puts them in the pot. She brings them back, and she starts cracking the grains. And it starts to rain. Well, she don't want to get her hair wet, so she goes in the teepee, watches soaps, and eats bonbons, and leaves the grains outside. Well, after 3 or 4 days, she sees her man coming home from a hunting trip, and she goes, "Oh, I have not prepared the grains into any type of food." So what she did was she took the grains, she drained the liquid from it, and fed it to the man. Well, the man they go to the teepee, go to bed that night, and by the end of the night, the teepee's rocking. He wakes up in the morning and says, "I have to get some more of that." The beer, that is. And has the woman recreate the process so that everybody in the village can have beer. And before you know it, all the teepees arrive. Essentially what I told you is the process of making beer. It's very simple. The grains are collected and they're dried, dried typically through a kiln. Oftentimes they're sprouted first. The more that the grains are dried, typically the darker the beer is going to be, with a stout being from grains that are almost burnt. Once the grains are dried, water is run over the grains and the malt is extracted from that, which malt is basically a sugary substance. That substance is then put into a fermenter and hops are added to it. There's thousands of different types of hops that are available, and each one of them changes the flavor characteristics of the beer. There are other additives that you can also put in the beer. To that, now becomes the wort once everything is added to it. Once the wort reaches a temperature below 80 degrees, you introduce yeast to it. There again, there's thousands of different strains of yeast. A lot of beer masters, in fact, hold that yeast proprietary and lock it in vaults so that their competition can't get a hold of it. Some of them go as far as even kill the yeast in the beer and introduce other yeast so that they can ferment it in the bottle. So once, after 4 to 7 days, you leave that in the fermenter. What happens is the yeast starts eating the sugar, CO2 is expelled, and what is left is an alcohol base for the beer. After 4 to 7 days, some beer does take a little bit longer, and there's 2 primarily types of yeast that you can add to beer, a Yale yeast and a lager yeast. Basically, the only difference is Yale yeast ferments on the top of the beer at a higher temperature, and lager yeast works on the bottom of the beer, typically at a lower temperature. And once the fermentation is done, you put it into a bottle. You also put into that bottle some type of sugar. It can be, corn syrup. It can be regular table sugar. Everybody uses a different type of sugar. The yeast in the bottle then eats the sugar after you cap it, and it creates the carbonation in the bottle. After you're done with that, you let it sit for 2 weeks, and that creates the carbonation. Then you put it in the refrigerator, And as soon as they get cold, you pop it open and you're ready to go. Some general things about making beer is when you make beer, one of the things you have to be very careful of is everything that touches the beer needs to be sterile. If you don't have everything sterile, you'll get all flavors in your beer. You can generally get started making beer for less than $20. I suggest if somebody wants to try it, they go out and they get a Mr. Beer. That comes with a kit that has the malt already done, so you don't have to mess with the grains. And you can make 2 gallons of beer, it costs you $20, it comes with bottles and everything. And refills are between $20 and $30. Some of the other things that you have to be careful of is when you do put sugar in the bottle and you're carbonating the beer, be very careful how much sugar you put in the bottle. Because if you put too much sugar in the bottle, the glass and everything's going to blow up. Oh. And I had some friends that have done that, and their wives have not been very happy with it. They were calling me on the phone, what have you taught my husband to do? Apparently they can't figure out how much a tablespoon and a teaspoon is. The other thing is, you have to be very careful with beer, is that if you drink too much beer, you tend to do stupid stuff. So I hope you now have a better understanding of how to make beer. It has changed our civilization and has been around for centuries. So beer, beer, beer.